Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today, you will be listening to Brad Loomis, Alberto Nunez, and Jeff Alberts as they discuss how to keep your cool on show day. You'll learn everything that you should do and think about in the 24 to 48 hours before your show and throughout the show itself to ensure that you're calm, collected, and poised while trying to display all your hard work on the stage. We're talking posing, walking, tanning, sleeping, shaving, backstage time, how to handle schedule delays and meal timing mess-ups, and so much more. Whether you're a new competitor, a future competitor, or someone who's ever considered being a physique competitor, this episode will be full of enlightening insight from experienced pros. Also, if you're a coach of physique athletes, this will be full of valuable reminders of what competitors tend to miss or forget in their first few times on stage, and what our 3DMJ coaches find to be the most helpful ways to deal with them. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head on over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 231. So let's get into it. Here is Keeping Your Cool on Show Day with Jeff Alberts, Brad Loomis, and Alberto Nunez.
All right. Well, this one's going to be fun. We're going to go through some formal things you have to, I guess, be aware of, especially if you've never done a show or limited experience, because they all can be a little different. And then I guess just some casual stories as well as we go through this, because a lot of things happen backstage. One thing is for sure, when I first decided I wanted to compete, just because the process to get there is so, and by process, I mean like all the things you do on your own, like your diet, your training, you're so on time and you're scheduled. You think the day is going to be that way. You think, oh, well, the big day is going to mimic how I do things. And then very quickly, you find out that it wasn't that way. The way I kind of assumed it would be, it was like whenever you ran a big invitational meet, like the times were kind of set out. Like, okay, men's 400 this time. And you kind of know that, okay, like I'll go do my thing until then. It's nothing like that. And that can be quite troubling, quite a shock to new competitors. So was I the only one who expected that? Who thought it would be super standardized, like every show kind of the same, like every other sport, right? Like, hey, you play some basketball, it's going to be 4 quarters, right? 3 periods, you play some hockey. It's nothing like that, which is you have to learn to build thick skin while you have your thin skin game going on.
You kind of have to learn how to roll with the flow. Go with the flow, because as bodybuilders, we're very on point with things. They're well structured. But show day, oftentimes the show never runs on time. It's very rare you have a show that's just really, really organized to the point where it's like you said, you're going to be on stage at 9. They tell you 9 and you're on at 9. It's like, no, you're supposed to go at 9. You're actually on stage at 10. It's almost like that. But I know for me personally, my first show, the only thing I was thinking about was, oh my God, I'm going to be running around backstage in my underwear. That was the most thing I was the most scared of, was just I'm wearing these little tiny things in front of all these people. It wasn't so much the stage. It was more I was thinking backstage, because that was awkward to me. And then once I got there, I kind of realized oh, everybody's in their underwear. It's not a big deal. But from there, it was just I had no idea how things kind of went, because back when I first started competing, there was no formal instructions sent out ahead of time through emails. It was you get to the show, it's you're there, you're okay, where do I go now? And it's almost like I kind of mentioned before, you're kind of just going with the flow. You're at the mercy of the promoter, in the moment.
Yeah, you're just kind of like cattle, and the 4-H people are just kind of, this is what they want to see, and yeah, things just even now that there's a schedule, quite often, like it's more confusing, as I think, because I thought we had a schedule, and the day ends up being nothing like how you would imagine. So I could only imagine for you, Jeff, because like you've seen shows get like when they're smaller, they're easier to consolidate, right? There's fewer competitors, and now they've become such large gatherings that it's hard. It's hard. It's so unpredictable.
Like, how many times you guys had athletes, like, because the show's not flowing the way, quote unquote, it's supposed to, based off of promoter said email, the timing, that they have like freakouts. You know, you get the email or the message like, hey, it's running an hour behind, and like, what do I do with my meals? So it's like there's a lot of stress on the back end. So you guys get that quite often?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, because everybody is they're so fixated on everything that's led up to prep, or led up to the show, like Berto said. You know, they're very structured. They get their meals in on time, they're training on time, and et cetera, et cetera. And so they're of the opinion that if I don't, and I was this way, if I was like, if I don't get this meal in at this time, I'm not going to peak right. I'm not going to look good on stage, you know? And it was a lot of times, especially first-time competitors, they're of the opinion that, okay, you know, it says about 3 hours out from stage time. I need to have that at 11 a.m. because I'm going to be on stage at 2, you know? And then you get that message at 1:30. They're saying, I'm not going to be on till 3. I'm going to miss my peak.
That was my first impression of Eric and Adam. Was at the NGA California.
At the NGA California.
Like, this was before I even talked to Eric. It was just like observing.
2009.
It's 2009.
So
and I'm like, at that point, I've done like over 20 shows. So I'm like pretty much a veteran, and I'm pretty chill and relaxed back there. I don't think I was talking to too many people. And I just see Eric and Adam like getting their rice cakes ready and slapping whatever they're putting on, jelly or whatever it was. And they were like checking the time, and like you could just tell they were just, the stress was just way up there. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, and whether you get that rice cake in an hour or 5 minutes from now, or if it was 20 minutes or it's 30 minutes, it's like probably not going to make a huge deal, you know, because I kind of knew based on like when we were going to be going on, like, I'm like, this is going to be much later in the day. Like by the time they get that food in, it's going to be well processed. But just like you could see just this stress on them, just how their demeanor was and fixation on the food and making sure they're putting the jelly on, like everything had to be just perfect. So sometimes that stress, in my opinion, can actually like be counterproductive. You know, one, it can throw your look off because the stress is really high, but also you're not really fully enjoying like the actual experience, because obviously when you put months of work into this, and if you're just nothing but a stressed out mess backstage, and it's like you're just like, in a sense, like not enjoying yourself.
Well, and how many times do focusing on things like that really in the grand hierarchy of things is pretty low down on the totem pole, you know? And they get on stage and they don't know their right from their left, or they don't know what their number is, or
well, it's kind of like a snowball effect, right, Brad? It's like there's anxiety and stress around hitting these meals at specific times based on an arbitrary schedule.
Correct.
That may or may not go accordingly. Then because they feel like they're behind or whatever, like now they're stressed out. They're trying to rush a pump process or something, trying to get oil on, like all these things
and they
that
just
you got to
totally
do.
lose their head. Yeah.
You're not even thinking the fact, like when I'm out there on stage, I need to probably be conserving energy because I have a lot of posing ahead of me. And I want to be able to ensure I'm enjoying myself when I'm actually out there. But that anxiety, because I've been there too, where it's like that stress level just kind of amplifies. By the time you get out there, you're just like so worked up. And then you kind of realize like 1 or 2 poses into it, you're shaking like crazy. Like then you kind of know like, oh shit, I'm in trouble here. Like I can't even control my poses at all. Like I'm just shaking. I look very unprofessional up here.
Well, and you just forget who you are. You're like in your own world up there, and you got to remember that you got a panel of judges in front of you. You're wearing a number. They don't know your name, and they say, hey, you know, Mr. 34, take 2 steps to your left. And they're in their own world. They don't even know they're talking to. They're they're holding that pose and they've just totally lost their composure and even their presence and their awareness that they're even on stage. It's like, you've worked months and some people years for this. Listen, take it in, open your eyes, look at what you're doing and enjoy this, and just look. That's one thing I always like to instill in my competitors. Number one, be prepared. Let's make sure that you've practiced, you know your poses, but then get on stage and take it in, look around, listen to what judges are saying, You got to have
like
that
number
awareness.
34. And then you kind of look around, like no one's really is, like you're not noticing. Number 34. There's like, you got the audience saying 34.
Yeah. You in the blue.
Yeah. 34 and 22 switch places. And it's like, how many times the judge has to repeat that?
Exactly.
Sometimes, like 3-4 times.
Yeah. 34, raise your hand. Oh, I'm 34.
You know what? To be honest, though, I think I've done that before. Where I'm like, oh, me? But
Yeah,
I think like, what do you do in that situation? Your number gets called, like, it's like, okay, raise your hand so that way both competitors can kind of see each other and then you can swap places.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, like, you kind of just hear your number and you don't even raise your hand. You're kind of just looking around like, okay.
Luckily, I was prepared. I'd seen a couple of shows and, I
You've
practiced.
never had a brain fart on stage though, Brad?
I can't. I'll have to think about it. If something comes up, I will, I'll bring it up. But no, I don't. I've never lost my number and had it fall on the stage. I've never tripped and fell. I don't think so, Jeff, but I'll think about that as we're recording here.
What about you, Bert?
No, I think the closest thing is second time around, I took my sandals up on stage for my posing routine.
Oh, no. This last one you had, wasn't it earplugs?
Oh, yeah. I had my earplugs on. But I was in such chill mode for that show, like, because...
So it's almost the opposite, right? Like, you're not high stress, you're actually too relaxed.
Yeah. It was, because that's the difference with the NPC shows. You could literally sign up the day before. Or the day of, almost. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the day of, but for sure the day before, you can come in and, sign up for your classes. Then that's it. There's no poly. And in my case, I got to use my own tanning product. I got to use Dream Tan, so it felt very hands off. And there, they really treat you like cattle. So you know that you might be the 6th division going up. Show starts at 8:30, but you're probably gonna be up there at 9. Yeah. So super straightforward. But yeah, I remember that one. I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious. I hope they don't see it as something disrespectful. But I was ready to be docked for that. The sandals was actually pretty embarrassing because I didn't figure it out until I hit my side pose and you spike your front leg and then that spike felt differently. It's like something's clinging onto my foot. I looked down and I'm like, oh, okay. So it was a very comfy posing routine because of the footwear. I don't know.
You
I
just
think
did that
for
for
me,
the posing routine?
Yeah, it was just the posing routine. I guess when I first started bodybuilding, I thought that a lot of the stress was going to be kind of, okay, there was for sure the peak week, but then there is everything that goes on the day before, like the polygraph, the color, you get your first coat at some point, and you get to see all the athletes, right? Because usually they're all kind of hovering around the same area, waiting for the same procedures. And that's when I guess shit really hits you that, oh, this is for real. The NGA show that you spoke about, we always had our athletes meeting by the pool, right? Mm-hmm. In that hotel. And you could just see everyone, and they all kind of look like you, right? Because for weeks, months, you've been really, for the most part, the only person you've seen as lean as you are. And then you're like, fuck, everyone looks amazing. I wonder what that guy looks like. And that's when the mind games can really, really start to sink in. But yeah, I think anxiety for most folks starts Friday. Friday is when it's oh shit, I really got myself into this. This is for reals. Now it's a little different. Now it's I kind of take joy in the fact that every show is going to be a little different. I'm like, I wonder what sort of mess this is going to be like this time. And you kind of look forward to it, and you kind of even like laugh about it a little bit, you know. I missed a poly at some point during my last season. Like I completely fucked up the appointment time. But I mean, that's kind of the nature of the thing. Like it's just, you just have to learn, like you said, to like flow like water, and just like whatever it is, and the better you get at that, the less likely you're going to induce some sort of anxiety provoked, like weird look. On that note, I think just because we have many different levels of competitors listening, and still too many people are kind of banking on like Saturday morning looking a certain way, right? Like I'd say Fridays when you kind of look the way you want to, you know? Friday, it's like all the carbs that you need to have in should be in for the most part. And you're just kind of ideally like just cruising and taking care of all the other procedures that you need to, color, hair, you know, you need to take care of your hair. But like in regards to peaking is like by the time you get to Friday, like that is it. So like if you're, I don't know, eating cheeseburgers the night before or something like that, it's like that's gonna most of the time lend to some surprises the day after. But yeah, Friday should be pretty chill because you should have your look under control by then. That's the goal.
I think I agree with like you like as far as like your own protocol, as far as having the way you should be looking, like you should be really relaxed about that and know what you're doing. It's the other stuff that like annoys me and stresses me. It's like, okay, I got to check into the show. I got to do a polygraph test if the show requires it. I got to get tanned. If I have to train, I got to train. Plus other, you know, laundry list of things that maybe I have to do on a personal note, checking into hotels, making sure family's situated, going grocery shopping. Like that's another like added stressor. Like there's all these to do things, you know, on Friday that to me, it's like super, super stressful outside of just like taking care of my own like bodybuilding protocols. So it's almost like if I'm traveling to a show, I want to get there maybe a little earlier than a Friday. Like, okay, let me get there Wednesday or Thursday so I can be a little bit more settled. And like, so I would try to make Friday as relaxing as possible. And it kind of just depends on logistics, but oftentimes like, okay, what can I remove off my plate here or reprioritize things? So that can mean like, okay, maybe I'm putting the tan later in the day so I don't have to like sit in my tan all day. Like that's annoying, like to be sitting in tanner all day Friday and then all day Saturday. It's like, that is so uncomfortable. I'd rather, okay, let me just get that Friday night. Then I only have to deal with it in the evening time. So things like that, I just think of like, how can I prioritize these things so the day is like super, super relaxing? Because like my best peaks have always been when my feet are up on the couch early in the evening, watching NFL Network or watching whatever, some sports, and not really having my mind focused on bodybuilding. So, and I'm like that personality that has to have everything like perfectly aligned up front. I drive my wife nuts with this stuff because she's more the free flower. Like, and I kind of learned from here, like just go with the flow. Like our weekends are never planned. I try to plan it, but it's never planned. And I'm like, okay, I'm just at her mercy. Like whatever happens, happens. And at the end of the day, we always have fun. So she's taught me how to kind of just relax when things aren't in perfect order. And I think that's huge when it comes to like the day before a show, even the day of a show, 2 days before a show, that type of thing.
Yeah, I would agree because you always want to have everything done come Friday evening. That was always my goal, you know. I mean, little things like shaving, you know.
Yeah, I forgot about the shaving part.
Don't wait until Friday evening, you know, to do your shaving, you know, because that's one more thing you're going to have to worry about, you know. Get your shaving done earlier in Friday. You know, a lot of times on Friday when you're doing your polygraph and you're doing your tanning and things like that, you got nothing cooking in the morning, you know. Get up, have your food, get shaved, you know, get all of your shaving done. I'll never forget, there was a show that we were at when we very, very first started Team 3DMJ, and Bert, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a kid there that didn't shave at all. And I'm back there shaving his freaking legs, you know. And I can't remember how I got roped into that, but I just remember thinking to myself, what the hell? This guy showed up to a show and he didn't shave, you know? And it was not your guy that you were talking about that, oh, I thought this was a natural bodybuilding show. Like I needed to be up here natural, all natural, you know? No, this kid didn't shave. He didn't know that he needed to shave.
I was going to say, to be fair, like some people are just kind of unaware that, okay, we need to be looking tight up there. Like everything needs to be clean and tidy and tight. As I remember back in the day, and this is before I was coaching, like this is like in the early 90s. It might have even been late 80s. I was at the Mr. Zucchini Festival, right? Remember that, Bert Hayward, the Zucchini Festival? It would have the Mr. Zucchini. So, and this show was outside and it was open to the public. So all these people who are attending the Zucchini Festival had access to this bodybuilding show. This guy gets on stage and front double bicep and just a tremendous amount of like armpit hair and, you know, quite the distraction, right? So, and this was before I even started competing. So I was like, even I knew like more, because that was the first time I ever attended a bodybuilding show. Like that doesn't look right. Like that just does not look right. So it was pretty quite obvious. Like he was unaware that he needed to like trim everything up. So I think it's important as coaches, and if you're not a coach or you're just an athlete looking to compete for the first time, like research, like all these little details, like it might not seem like a big deal, but like shaving and like making sure your posing trunks fit right, like all these types of things can make a pretty big difference when you're out there on stage. So, I mean, sometimes when you get a very green athlete, like, yeah, that's something you have to kind of like bring up is that, okay, you know, we have to shave and how we go about that. You guys might have your own like tips, but this is something that's probably not talked about too often out there is like how to remove body hair. And there's different ways of doing it. Like I've experimented with like back in the day, like Nair. And that stuff just tore my skin up. Like it'll just burn literally burn my skin up. So I was like, okay, that's not the route. Then I've done just like the straight razor, you know, just like a regular razor. But now it's like nowadays I use a clipper, clip all the longer hairs, clip it all the way down as low as I can get it. And then like you said, Brad, probably like either Friday morning or even Thursday evening, I'm taking off, like I'm going all the way down with the razor. But as a guy, something I learned from my wife is in the shower, use hair conditioner, not soap, not shaving cream, because hair conditioner glides a lot better. So you don't really get like any rashes, cuts, or anything like that. So that helped out a great deal. So like the last 3-4 seasons, I've been doing that. It's worked out pretty well. And that's the one thing about bodybuilding I don't like. It's just the hair removal. That's probably the worst thing for me is the hair removal.
That's the way it is for a lot of folks, yeah. Because I have a little system that I like to make sure, because we as coaches, our athlete is a representation of us, and I'm the most proud when an athlete is on stage and they are looking the part of a professional, you know, because I did my job to get them ready for that competition. It's just like any coach, you know, football team, they're on the field. When they execute their plays, you as a coach, that's a reflection. You put your work in, and all those players knew their jobs and knew what they needed to be doing before they even stepped foot on that field, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, I have a little system. Usually it's about 9-10 weeks out. I just tell them, okay, go ahead. I want you to do 1 or 2 things here. I want you to just stand in the shower, get the clippers out, everything comes off. Or pick a body part, shave that body part. The next time you're in the shower, shave another body part. The next time you're in the shower, go shave another body part, and kind of go into a circular rotation to where you're shaving a body part like every time that you're in the shower, right? And again, yeah, conditioner is huge because it almost acts like a shaving cream almost, but it's not quite. It's a little bit more durable, you know. 8 weeks out, start working on the posing routine. First, what's your music? Let's get your music picked out. I want something that is not going to over rev you, get you overly charged. It's going to get you really pumped up, and you're going to over pose. You're going to speed up your routine. You're going to sweat and shake. But I want something happy. I want something that strikes a good, happy, emotional chord for you. Then we're not going to do anything fancy. Once we get the posing music picked out, we're just going to turn in a circle, and we're just going to use the muscular poses that you've been practicing now for 12, 15, 16, 20, 24 weeks, whatever. You know, and we're just going to turn in a circle. It's as simple as that. You know what I mean? And usually about 4 weeks out, Let's start collecting little data points. How much water do you drink? Let's have you log that. How many liters of water do you drink every day? Log that in your protocol. How much sodium do you take in? Log that in your protocol, you know. And then usually the week before peak week or right about peak week, at the very beginning of peak week, let's go over show day. You're going to have to make sure that, you know, you got your food all packed up in little Tupperware containers. We're going to have a basic schedule, but you know what? It's not going to be the end of the world. Always better to have your food in a little bit early than a little bit late, right? And then I always like to meet before my athletes the night before the show. You know, we'll just do a little Zoom call. Okay, let's go over everything here so that we got you prepared. You know, so I have a little system so that all of those things that we're talking about, you know, are kind of all checked off. And yeah, I love it when you see first-time competitors as a novice on stage. I don't even care where they placed, as long as they're on stage, they're smiling, they look good, they're representing what we, you know, did every single week. You know, that's where if they top 3, top 2, top, you know, winner, that's icing on the cake. You know, because yeah, you want to look professional. You know, you want to be smiling, you want to look like you're having fun. You know, you want to pay attention to what the judges are saying. And yeah, I mean, you put a lot of work into this. So look the part of a pro up there, whether you're a first timer or you're like Jeff Alberts, that's done. We'll let him say how many shows.
I don't even know now. It's in the 40s. But I think something I learned from you, Berto, is that like in 2011, because I remember turning the keys over to you, like, hey, just do my peak for me. I don't want to think about anything. And I don't want to have to try to assess or anything like that. So you basically wrote my peak and I followed it pretty much to the T. And it was when we flew out to KC, and it was the day before the show. Was it 2 days? I can't remember if it was a day or 2 days when we got there. But first thing we did from the airport, we checked in and then went to the grocery store. And I'm like, what are we going to get? What kind of food we got to do? You know, I'm in my brain going, okay, I need to be super structured. And he's like just super chill. He's just like, just so chill, Brad. He's like, wasn't saying nothing. He's like, all he said was, I got you. He starts throwing stuff in the cart. And it was like foods that are like, really? This is like what we're going to be eating? And it wasn't like unhealthy type food. It was just stuff that I don't would have never done in the past on my own. Because it was more like, okay, just very just structured. And it wasn't so much like there was anything magical or anything about the food. It was the demeanor that he was doing this in, that you were doing this in, Bert. That was like, okay, this guy is just like so relaxed and so chill. Like that energy like was on to me now, because he brought me from being up here. Now I'm down here. And long story short, of course, we did exceptionally well the next day. Like it peaked exceptionally well. And I think it's just having that presence, someone like to be super chill and relaxed during that time helped out a great deal. It's kind of like dogs, right? Like whatever energy you have around a dog, that's what a dog's
they're a
gonna do.
reflection of that. Yeah, they're like a mirror almost.
So it's like, so when I'm like getting athletes ready for the stage, it's like, okay, yes, it's more about just kind of reminders of like, hey, you worked really hard to get to this point. No matter what happens. Like the show could be a shit show where it's like unorganized and it's so chaotic, the timing's all off, but you don't always have control over those things. But what you do have control over is how you react to those things. So if you're going to follow that same energy as the unorganized promoter and all that, then guess what? You're basically going to mimic that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be like Berto and be like super chill, super relaxed. And no matter how this show goes, I'm going to make the most of the situation. Because one, I worked way too hard not to enjoy that day. And I think people forget that because they're so focused on trying to be perfect. I'm trying to have everything perfect, every timing and all that. It's got to be perfect. And it just ends up being super, super stressful in the end. And they forget about all the hard work. And that is a celebration of all that hard work up to that point, is you actually getting on stage and showing everybody, like, my body hair is gone. I got a nice tan. I got the oil glistening. I got a nice pump backstage. I didn't over pump. I got a pump, but I didn't work out. There's things like you don't want to train backstage. You want to get a pump. There's a difference between training and getting a pump. So I've seen people actually train. They waste a lot of energy, right? Yes, they might have a great pump, but they're so depleted and tired, you got to get up there and pose. Well, if you're lacking energy, and of course your adrenaline is going to be flowing because you're on stage, that's where you start to get this shaking up when you're going through your poses. And it's hard to even smile when you're under such duress like that. You're stressed. So you're not actually enjoying yourself up there. You're struggling up there. And even if you're nailing poses down perfect, you can still see that stress and that anxiety. And as someone in the audience, like I've watched plenty of shows where you're just like, I'm nervous for him. It's like, again, I'm like that dog get the energy from the owner.
Yeah, you're feeling their nervousness, and then you're doing that, and you're a reflection of that. Yeah.
I really try to like be like Berto, like in the grocery store, just like, yeah, dude, just chill. We got this. We're just throwing some Hawaiian rolls in the shopping cart. It's all good.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here, Chief Science Officer of 3DMJ. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and let me just take 1 second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I do with Lauren Colenso-Semple, Eric Trexler, as well as Mike Zerdos. These are experts in their field, and we cover all the information relevant to you as an athlete or coach if you're working with strength or physique athletes, or if you're a recreational or competitive athlete yourself. We cover nutrition, training, sports psychology, and health. And we do this in written format, as well as, since you like the podcast, audio summaries, as well as video concept reviews. If you're a trainer, we also have continuing education credits for ACSM, NSCA, NASM, and ACE. So head over to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the products tab, and you can find us there. I look forward to seeing you, and enjoy the podcast.
One thing we've gone over, it's like, hey, have your big rocks in order, right? It's like, hey, shave on time, know when you need to get your color in, all that stuff. And once you have that sorted out, it's like, well, whatever happens on show day, when it comes to timing, one thing that always brought me a lot of peace is the fact that, guess what? It happened to everybody else, right? So if we're like 4 hours behind, which sounds crazy, but it does happen, it's like, well, guess what? Like everyone's going through it too. So we're all kind of on even ground anyways. But yeah, one thing that I get nervous, a wide array of emotions when I'm competing. And one way that like I've liked to consolidate like strong emotions is I almost see them as like when a toddler's having like a temper tantrum. It's like you don't like play up the energy. You just kind of look at them and you're like, all right, this is what we're doing, bro. Okay. Right. And I kind of do that as like, I feel the wave of nervousness or whatever's coming or I'm frustrated because we're starting late. It's like, you can feel that coming in and it's just like, you just sit there, you acknowledge it, slow things down for yourself and then just move on, and that's all you really can do. And yeah, eventually you just kind of, you're in peace with the fact that everything is never like the only show that I'm ever like, okay, this is going to go according to plan is Jan Roulette in Kansas City has a show, but she's an anesthesiologist. So there you have
Timing's
it. Like,
got to be perfect.
yeah. I remember she was like, the lightweights are on at 9 a.m.
We're on at 9.
Sharp. And I'm like, bullshit.
No.
I hang around to see this happen, but it's not happening. And there was a clock right there. It's like we walked out and I'm like, holy, I've never experienced this. 9, we were on at 9. And not only that, but they had 2 stages going on at this show. So yeah, one for the amateurs, right? And then one for the pros.
Yes.
So there's 2 shows going on simultaneously. So if you can ever do a Jan Roulette show, like do a Jan Roulette show. It was, I don't expect it, but it was like really pleasant. But yeah, everything, like even show day, like half the time they don't start on time. At least drug-free shows usually don't start on time, right? Someone's missing, a judge, something. They can't get into a certain room. They can't get the lights on. But yeah, it's, if anything, it just starts to kind of like become funny and it makes like that day special in its like own unique way. Like this is what we all dealt with collectively. And I almost, at this point, wouldn't have it any other way. I would, but I guess I've learned to see it as like, let's see how y'all do it every time I do a different show, and Yeah. It's just part of your experience at the end.
I was going to say something and I totally lost my mind. But I'm relaxed. I'm relaxed right now. I'm not stressing on the fact that I forgot. But it's like, no, the point you talked about as far as like you're in the same boat as everybody else. Because I just had an athlete that competed and he was kind of like, this is after the fact. He's like, hey, my tan wasn't like the spray tanner wasn't that great. Botched my tan. And keep in mind, this is a first time competitor. So spray tans, oftentimes, or if you're doing it yourself, even like it's not going to look perfect up close. And I think that's what he was kind of freaking out on. Like he's kind of seeing himself and seeing maybe some blemishes here and there. Like it's never going to look perfect up close, but at a distance, under the lights, with the oil and all that, like it's very hard to notice like these little tiny blemishes that we might see as faults, but it's really not throwing things off too much. Unless that tan is just running and it's really drastic, I mean, it's not going to be too much of a hindrance. And I was kind of letting them know, like, hey, you weren't the only one that got spray tanned. Like, there were probably like 90% of the shows spray tanned by the same person or persons that are there. So you're all in the same boat, unless your base tan is just really, really bad. And that's important too, is like leading into a spray tan, like having a decent base tan can make a world of difference. You know, someone who's very white complected, it's going to be really rough if you're only getting like one or two coats. Someone who has a nice base tan gets one or two coats. There's going to be a difference to that under the lights. But these little blemishes like this, it had him like, I could tell like he was stressed about it after the fact. So I can only imagine in the moment, show day, like how much of a stressor this was when it really didn't hinder the look. Because, you know, seeing the video and photos of his show, like, and he placed top 3. Like he did exceptionally well and he looked great up there. Like I couldn't see any blemishes in the tan whatsoever. And I had literally would zoom the picture in and couldn't really see anything. So sometimes like we create these anxieties in our own head when they're not really issues to begin with. So like you said, we're like everybody in a sense is kind of like on the same playing field when it comes to show day, unless you're just personally very unprepared.
Right.
Yeah, the color thing, this is where that really holds true, that we're all like in this together, usually quite quickly, because some color combos are like duds. Like very quickly word gets out, okay, everyone's kind of light. Some people are turning green. It's not staying on some people. And usually the judges are quite sensitive to the fact that, hey, like this color was less than ideal for the show. So they don't dock you for it because it's not your fault. And usually, that's how it goes. Like we've been to many shows where it's like, okay, I guess this year's a light year. Everyone's a little bit lighter than years past. So yeah, that's a big concern with the color. And usually, I guess one of the reasons that, hey, whatever the show's providing might not be a bad idea, because like if you do your own thing and they see that your color's off because you used something different, okay, like that might be looked at differently, or at least that would partially worry me. Whereas like if it's like the show color and like the show color wasn't very good, yeah, it sucks, but at least, it will not be weighed into the scoring in any way. And it hardly ever is. Like even people who who sweat so much that it just drips off to the point where they're no longer tan by the end of the posing rounds. Same deal. It's like judges understand that like we can't control those things.
If I've had those moments on stage where the tan does start to run and drip, because like if you're up there a good while and they're putting you through a pretty good fight up there, it's like, yeah, you're gonna get hot, you might start sweating, that tan will start to drip down. But chances are you're probably not the only one in that predicament, especially if you're up there for a long period of time. So at that point, it's almost like you see, like I know at first I'm like trying to wipe it, but I realize like, okay, I'm just making matters worse here. And not only am I smearing it, but I'm drawing attention to it, because now I'm like up here doing this. So I think if you get in like a predicament where, let's say something is kind of going wrong, like what do you guys do in that situation? Like for me, I try to just, okay, let me just stay poised and let me just continue on like I normally would and not draw extra attention to the fact that something's not right here. Like like your sandals, Bert. Like it's not like you're like, hey, let me stop and kick my sandals off here, push them to the side, and let me go back to my routine. You kind of just kept going.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you really can do. Man, yeah, I've seen some bad things happen with tannings, and it's gonna happen to everyone at some point. Like I've yet to turn green, but I'm waiting for my turn to turn green because at some
I've turned
point,
green. Brad fixed me.
and usually that doesn't work out. It just starts looking like a darker green, right? So, geez, yeah. Again, it's so backwards because you do the best job you can to really just be a creature of habit throughout the whole process, and then show day is like a test of other skills that up until this point you haven't really had to work on, but they're definitely worth mastering because it's going to make it more enjoyable, but also it's going to help your bottom line at the end if you're like, this is just how the game is played. Sometimes the color is good, sometimes it's not, sometimes we're on time, sometimes the show doesn't end until like midnight. That's just how these things go.
What it all boils down to is just you be in control of what you can be in control of, be on stage, be present, listen, keep your eyes open, be, aware of the competitors around you, and then just go with it, just do what you were prepared to do there. And I remember when Bert and I competed in the 2008 Capital City, I started to feel my tan run because, the lights are shining on you, you're hot, and it just started to run just a little bit, above my eye. And I was like, well, I can't do anything about it. I let it do its thing, and I just posed and listened to the judges when they called out my number and make sure I look around. Okay, I'm supposed to change places with who, and just, you be in control of what you can be in control of. And if your tan starts to run, it starts to run, for whatever reason is meant to be that way, but you do what you prepared for and let all the rest of it just kind of, that goes for placing too. A lot of people are just so fixated on placing, I got to have everything perfect. I got to time my meals perfect. I got to make sure that everything is perfect, and anything that's a deviation from that is going to be, how many times have we heard competitors say, gosh, if I would have just had that rice cake, just half an hour later, I probably would have placed better. And it's just like, no, that's probably had nothing to do with it. You probably just got beat by somebody that was more muscular or more conditioned or more symmetrical than you, Don't worry about your placing. Just get up there and do what you've prepared for. And then let's let everything lay where it lays, and that way, that you were ready and you did everything that you could, to place well. And then it's just a matter of, it's not up to you, as far as where you finish.
Brad, it's like all the fuckery that goes on like Friday, Saturday, like with things just not being where you would like them to be. Like it gets you ready for the placing part, because the placing is like the ultimate example of this, where it's like, bro, you just judge me, and that's all you can do. Like it's if anything, like, I guess we worry about those things too much, and at the end it's like, shoot, that part I think is even harsher, because at a certain point we all just make peace with like whatever it is like whatever it is, like come when it comes to placings, like nothing you can do about that. That's the small print to the sport. So I guess when I think about it that way, everything that takes place the day before and the day of the show kind of leads up into that moment where it's like, bro, you have no control. Just do your best.
Yeah, because a lot of times what I tell people is, I'm like, you know what? Especially if you're in a big show, you have a much better chance of losing than you do winning. So you might as well get uncomfortable, be comfortable with uncomfortable and grasp the fact that you're probably not going to win. There's going to be 9 guys up there. You have a 1 in 9 chance of winning. Which means you have an 8 in 9 chance of losing. So come to grips with that and be prepared to do what it is that you have been prepared for, and then just let it be where it ends up being. And if you come out on top, well, that's just icing on the cake,
So what I'm about to say is it's based off of years and years of experiences. So the perspective I'm about to say is like, it's easy for me to say that now with all the experience that I have. but hard for someone who's, let's say, just going to be stepping on stage for the first time or maybe 3 or 4 times. It's like you can go to a show, right? And you can do everything perfect. Everything, just the stars align and you win the show. You're the best on stage. You can literally go to a different show the next weekend and have the stars align again for you and come dead last. You have no control over who shows up at shows, and there's always someone better than you out there. They're just not on stage with you in that particular show that you may happen to win. And it took me a long time to realize that the placings, they're not like, they don't really define the prep or me as a bodybuilder. They don't define all the work that I've done over the years or the preps to get to that point. So the only thing you could do is like reach your full potential, and deep down whether you did everything you should do in a prep to be at your best on show day. So I've kind of learned to like, okay, when I get on stage, like, again, that's the celebration of all the hard work up to that point, regardless of what the judges tell me, like what they define my success as being on that particular day based on who's standing there. Like in the end, I know if I did my job or not. And don't get me wrong, when I'm on stage, I want to beat everybody else. Like, who doesn't?
Yeah,
like,
who doesn't?
Everybody's
Yeah.
up there. Who doesn't? Like, I try to, but, I've had those shows where I didn't win, and I was bitter. And I walked off stage, verbally saying, I got screwed, I got robbed. And I'm not proud of that now, but that just showed the level of maturity where I was at in my journey at that time. Had a lot to learn still. It's like, okay, I kind of looked ugly to some people. Like, oh my gosh, this guy's full of himself. I remember looking at photos the next day after a show at Mr. Fremont going, I should have won. And the guy that beat me was like 20 or 30 pounds bigger than me, harder than me. But in my brain, because I felt like I deserved to win because I worked so hard, that I should win, because I did everything right. And it's not until after the fact that, you look at it and you go, oh, wow, like, yeah, I was far from winning. And the mentality around that was like, it needed to grow a lot. So again, it's like show day. It's, yes, you train to try to win. Like, I think that should be part of the equation, but you also have the perspective of that. As long as you're reaching the full potential and you're having fun up there, like in the end, you're going to probably find a lot of reward in that. It might happen the night of the show. It might happen a week later. It might happen a year later, 10 years later. But at some point you kind of come to the terms where you're just like, there's always going to be someone better. It's all about more so timing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you lose quite a bit, like we all have, maybe me more than maybe you guys, because I think you guys have won a little bit more early on, I should say. Yeah, you guys had more early success than I did.
The later success,
in your
for
journeys.
sure.
So when you're losing and losing and losing, and it takes you years to kind of like, oh, I got this external reward of a pro card. I didn't get it till 38. My first show was when I was 22. You just get like a deeper appreciation for when it actually happens. And I realized, like, okay, if I would have won earlier with the attitude that I had, I probably wouldn't have appreciated it. I probably wouldn't have learned as much, just because of the ego was too much in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that you can take from, an actual show day, besides trying to align the stars and making everything super, super perfect. I think it's important that you embrace the fact that things aren't going to go perfect, and you're going to learn a lot more by not having everything like just line up perfectly.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to embrace the fact like it's okay to make mistakes, because they sure teach you quite a bit.
It's almost like show day really test like who you really are, right? Because again, like nothing's predictable. Some things might not go your way. And I think sometimes when we're prepping and we've been doing our job, we're like, okay, well I'm that guy, but you're that guy under like these synthetic conditions that you created for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that gets taken from you, and then you get to really see who you are. And guess what? That person, well, that's still the same person that was doing all that. So that can probably teach you something when it comes to the part of the process that you do have more control over. There's probably things to work on.
Yeah, because I'll never forget that first show that you guys, the three of us did, in fact, in Kansas City at Jan Roulette show. I totally missed out on a lot of good memories, because I was so fixated on how I placed, Because that was a stacked show. Remember, I think we had 11 guys in our class, and I think there was 12 in the heavyweights, And I remember after the show just being disappointed. I mean, I was just downtrodden because I knew that I was not even going to be in the top 5, and I was not used to that, I mean, as an amateur, I always bought the DVD because I knew I was going to be in the overall, I knew I was going to see myself on stage at least 3 times, and yeah, when you're, kind of in the back, and they're looking at the top 5 and you're standing back there just kind of waiting for you to figure out whether you're going to be 9th, 10th, or 11th, that's kind of a humbling experience, and I remember just missing out, when I look at the reflection of it, I missed out on, time spent with you guys. Remember our good buddy Ken, that was our chauffeur, was there. My wife was there, yeah. And I missed out on a lot of that because I was so downtrodden about how I knew that I placed, but here's the positive of that. I mean, number one, my at least everything that was in my control was on point. The color was on point. I peaked well. I was conditioned. I was ready. I posed well. I was probably the best I have ever posed, in really my entire life, really. In fact, when I look at the pictures now, I'm like, wow, that was a new level of Brad, I'd really kind of met, or was getting close to my potential at that point, and so, yeah, the presentation was all there, and I was prepared. It was just that now I was this 5'9" basketball player that's pretty good. And I was out there with a bunch of 6'7"ers, and 6'6"ers up there, I'm not going to do as good as I used to in high school, and all the other guys were like 5'11", 6 foot, the tallest guy was like 6'3". I'm that 5'9" basketball player that's up there with a bunch of guys that are like 6'7", there's nothing I can do at that point, all I could do is just focus on being ready. But what I can say is that I learned from that. And 3 years later, when I did the Natural Olympia, I placed in the exact same spot, second to last. Because I was up there with a bunch of guys, Kiyoshimuti, 6'9" on the basketball court, and I'm 5'9", and I got to enjoy having you guys there. I got to enjoy having, all you guys stay in my house, and then there again, new level. That was a new level of Brad, and I learned from that.
I remember both experiences for you, like how I kind of saw it, like through my eyes. Like you enjoyed the show in KC, but it was on another level at the Natural Olympia. Like you're just so much more happier. Like after we go out to eat, like you were super happy, we were celebrating, and like you said, it's like roughly the same placing.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, now that I think about it, that was the same year. That was 2011.
It was the same year. Yep.
It was the same year.
I forgot about that. That was the
right.
same year. Yeah. So at least I didn't take 3 years to learn my lesson, right? It was just a couple months.
And honestly, in the long term, all the shit that goes wrong, like sometimes makes for some of the best memories. Like Kansas City, like the fire alarm
going off.
And I remember I'm up there trying to take it apart because
I got a picture of that.
It was deep in there. It just like everything's just kind of, I don't know, in hindsight, like you're like, oh man, that was funny, and that's what made that experience unique. And eventually you kind of learn to like look for these things, and you're like, oh shoot, like this is what makes this experience unique. They lost my luggage. All right, we'll be talking about this one for a while, and this will be different. So yeah, I remember that show so well, Brad, because it was that. I remember everything from the fire alarm to your wife and my girlfriend coming in with like after shopping way too freaking much.
And Bert at that same grocery store, Bert thought he was pleasantly screwing with me when he was actually, he didn't know what he was doing, because I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, Jeff, I'm used to having my potato chips and my whey protein, have it all measured out, and that's what I'm going to eat. I'm going to go to the grocery store, I'm going to buy that. And I'm sitting there going, God, what should I buy right now? And Bert's like, hey, Brad, you should get that distilled water. And I was like, oh shit, maybe I should buy distilled water. And I didn't know what to do. And then Ken goes up to you, Bert, and goes, hey, Berto, you better go pay attention to your boy over there.
That's when I realized, yeah, Brad's a little fucked up. I shouldn't be. And then
I shouldn't be
reeled it
messing
in.
with it right now.
Yeah. But you know, like shoot, like things just change so much over time. Like, man, there was this reel going around today. You know, the NBA playoffs are going on, and one of the final important plays, like LeBron called out all the screens that
He knew it
the
was gonna
Warriors were going to
happen.
do,
Yep.
and he literally pointed it
I
out
saw
like,
that.
here, you hear, you hear, you hear, and eventually it just kind of becomes that. Like the show I did in Canada, like I knew, yeah. So before sometimes people tend to crowd, so. And I'm like, oh, I hope I did it twice, and I didn't. I was like, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way. But I remember me correcting the guys in the middle of posing, where I'm like, I just kind of did that, and then literally
you
right
created
after,
space for yourself.
but like literally right after that, like the head judge was like almost synchronized. I'm like, I knew it was coming,
Right.
you know, and it was like space, and then like we need to be here, you know?
It's just
and I'm like, it's just you just seen almost everything at a certain point, you know?
But yeah, because I think that's an important thing to talk about is that as an athlete, when you're on stage, your competitive fire starts to get it upticks. So you think, okay, I'm going to get in front of this guy, or I'm going to get in front of that guy. I'm going to get squished into these guys and hide them or crowd them. And it's coming from a competitive standpoint. But when you think about it, you can't see. Like you knew, like, okay, these judges can't see. We're just two groups were clumped together, and I think that's your athlete experience, but also as you've been a judge too, so you've seen these things on both sides. So you needed space in order for these judges to get good looks.
Yeah.
So
it was
I
so
think
synchronized,
as an athlete,
so synchronized.
If you're listening, just be aware, like you do need space up there, and when the judges say to spread out, it's not a disadvantage.
No,
it's not a disadvantage.
Yeah, exactly. Because I remember that both of those shows, that one in Kansas City that we did, and then also the Natural Olympia, I really felt like I was up there with a bunch of professionals because it was so smooth. It was everybody that was up there had been up there and lived that stage life for quite a while, you know, because everybody is come time to change positions, or, you know, these guys raise your hands, you go to the back of the stage, call out. You know, Jeff was, I think, competitor number 2, you know, and everybody just, the flow was so good. And I think it was just because everybody had been there, they were calm and they were paying attention. They were paying attention and they were prepared, you know, to what it is that they needed to do. And I think that's really kind of a pleasure for judges, because you can kind of almost feel the judges' frustrations when they're like, guys, spread apart. You know, move a little bit. Let us get a look at you, you know, and they get, you can kind of feed off their frustration if you're up there, you know, kind of not following directions, you know, or they're telling you, hey, you know what, put your feet together. This is a symmetry round, you know, and you can feed off their frustration there in a way. But those two shows, that Natural Olympia show that I think was in November of 2011, and also that show that we did together, I felt like I was up there with a group of professionals, you know, everybody, there was no crowding. You know, everybody did what they were supposed to do. The posing routines were very crisp, on point. Everybody, you know, there was no delays. The music was all, you know, kind of all lined up perfect, you know. And I think that's kind of something that is an ideal situation that I think we should all strive for above all that other stuff, you know, placings and peaking and all that kind of stuff.
You guys have a judge's perspective because you guys have judged a few shows.
Yeah.
I've never judged. I've always kind of declined it because I didn't want to like have any of my athletes on the show I'm judging. But as far as like demeanor, like, you know, some people will say, well, you know, I'm going to show the judges that I'm the winner. You know, the demeanor will come across like maybe it's a little egotistical. Like, do you guys find value in that? Like, do you guys actually like, oh, that guy looks like his face, his demeanor looks like he wants to be the winner. So therefore I'm gonna place him a little higher because of that. Like, how much stock do you really think that goes into it? Like, what do you guys see as like the type of demeanor athletes should have in general on stage?
Well, first of all, we're not there to judge expressions. We're not there to judge game faces. We're not there to judge potential. We're not there to judge anything except for the physique that is on stage in front of us and under the criteria that we need to judge them on: symmetry, conditioning, and size, right? That's what we're judging on. So even though there might be an egotistical, hey, look at me, I'm the winner guy, and I don't like that. If he's got the best physique up there, if he's got the best symmetry, he's got the most muscularity, I have no choice. I have to place him above somebody else that might look very humble, might be smiling, look very good, and they just don't have the same caliber of physique, as the guy that is, kind of the egotistical guy. So that's the first thing we have to kind of come to grips with, is we have to judge the physique that's on stage. We can't say, oh, well, if he was 5 pounds leaner, he would have won, so therefore I'm going to put a 1 next to his name. No, that's not the case. He's not 5 pounds leaner. He's what he is right now, And so that's the big thing that we have to kind of differentiate. We're judging the physique, right? Now, with that being said, if I have 2 athletes that are up there, and I mean, let's just say for argument's sake, they are twins. They look exactly the same. They're built exactly the same. They have the muscularity the same. They're equally conditioned, right? And one guy's kind of arrogant, and one guy's, doing this the whole time and taking his time, doing all kinds of flamboyant,
flicking the
movements. Exactly. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And then the other one that's his twin, is a little more humble, is smiling, is enjoying himself. He's efficient, getting into his poses, but not rushing. He looks professional, right? I mean, that's kind of one of those subjective things where it's like, you know what? These guys are dead even, but that guy's irritating me. I don't like his professionalism, and so, yeah, I will probably give the nod, to the person that is looking more professional and is not doing that. Now, that's me. It's a subjective sport. Yeah. There might be somebody that's like, oh man, that dude there, I'm giving it to him. He looks like the winner. He looks like the guy that's in control, And so that subjectivity, it's a lot more than just the physique, right?
It's there, but it's like super, super rare where you're going to have someone who's identical like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's going to come down to the physique is the bottom line.
What do you think, Bert, on like demeanor? Like, you think it matters a lot? From a judge's perspective.
Yeah,
judge's perspective.
I think you just want people to look prepared and rehearsed, and that can look different. I don't know. Some people just have, punchable faces. You just gotta forget about that, right? So
when Berto's judging, I'm going to put a bag on my head. I don't want to get punched.
Luckily, Jeff, you don't have a punchable face. Now, me,
I don't
maybe.
know. It's subjective, right? Like he might say, "Damn, Jeff's just looking not right today. I'm gonna knock his shit out right now."
Oh my gosh, we need to timestamp that one.
But that's why you need to always revert back to the criteria. It's like, and if they're prepared and rehearsed, they're going to do a better job of fulfilling the criteria. So that's really all I look at. However, who's to say all judges do it this way, right? So like I've done things where, and this is like high level stuff. I actually did it last year, where I got a little posing quirk advice from one of the judges, and I knew he was going to be judging at Worlds. So I'm like, all right, I'll humor this bullshit. Let me do it. And I briefly just docked something up just a little bit so they can see, because judges are people too. So you have to take that into consideration. Judges are people too. So eventually you might even know what certain panels kind of like, and you can kind of like morph and twist things a little bit in a way that, hey, they're going to like it more. Right? So like if I was doing a show in the UK, I probably wouldn't squeeze my glutes, for example, because they don't like that out there. Just little things like that. But at the end, ideally, in a perfect world, unfortunately, that's not how the world works. Like judges would only be judging off the criteria and not their like their own like biases of like what you might be. So yeah, like it's just good to keep that in mind. And however that does manifest is totally like up to you.
Yeah, I'd say personally, like, I try to make sure executing poses that based off like the general criteria. Of course, I'll tweak them to make me look the best. But as far as like overall demeanor, I just kind of learned like I'm just gonna be myself.
Yeah. You can tell when someone's being themselves, and they look like they practice this, like they're cool. Just another day. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's important. To me, it's important because I've had athletes and I've seen athletes kind of like say out loud, like, I'm going to do this a certain way or act a certain way because it shows I'm the winner. And I'm like, oh, that's great. But I mean, it's based on, like you said, Brad, it's based on the physique more than anything else.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I luckily I have never judged a panel or I've never been on a panel that judged a competition like this, but I've heard of other officials say, look, you're the most muscular guy up there. The guy didn't win; he got second or third, for example, right? You were the most muscular guy up there, but your posing took away from your symmetry. You were hiding your lats on your front symmetry pose, which, as we know, is the most important pose, And so therefore you didn't have as good a symmetry. You didn't show the symmetry that you had, whereas so-and-so, the guy that won, for example, did, And we see this a lot in figure too, because it's all about symmetry. It's all about V-taper and those contrasting lines, right? And I mean, how many times do we see females that will do kind of more bikini type poses, not knowing that the criteria is, hey, look, you gotta stand up straight. You got to show your lats. You got to make sure your delts are showing, and you had the most muscle up there, but you didn't present the best physique because your presentation was off a little bit. And those things are important, and we got to make sure that we as coaches prepare our athletes to show their physique according to the criteria and make sure that we're able to take advantage of the perception of the eye and make sure that we give them the best chance, of placing according to the criteria, the highest that they can. So
maybe one last thing to touch on, like as far as your guys is like, once you're done competing, it's the day after, 2 days after, you're kind of looking at the photos, videos, and you got the placing you got. Maybe you're not 100% happy with it. Like, I know we've all seen this online. It's like, people complaining about the judging and, maybe, because again, it's subjective. Maybe there's some great calls, maybe there's some not so great calls, but what's your guys' thoughts on, like, in a sense, like trying to internalize all that, how to process that stuff? Because I know in the past, like I've kind of like just immediately like let my emotions just fly out to the world. And it's like, and then I kind of like after hindsight, I'm like, I probably shouldn't have said that. Or my feelings have changed about the placing because I have a lot more clarity now. So how do you like, and like you said, I think Berto said it, like the judges are human too. It's like NBA referees, it's like they're trying to make these judgment calls with quick, fast paced and
millisecond.
It's hard to be like, I wouldn't want their job. Like, I know it's an extremely hard job and they get scrutinized a lot, because of these judgment calls. And I think sometimes, like, I think it's important to kind of take a step back and kind of just realize that the judges are human. And I would say 99% of the time, like they're trying to be fair and they're probably trying to do the best job that they can for the athletes. And sometimes I think they get misjudged by us as athletes and we don't show enough respect towards them because it is a hard job. So what do you guys feel about that? Like, to me, it's like I kind of just learned, like, that perspective is like they can make a mistake too. And they might not have done it on purpose. It just can be honest mistake.
Yeah. And like you said, 99% of the time, right? Because there is that 1% up, I'm sorry, even less than that, where, you probably did get screwed by the judges. I mean, we all know here who got screwed by the judges, but it was one show out of what, Jeff, 40? Yeah, one show out of 40.
It's a low percentage. Yeah.
It's a super low percentage that's going to happen. So you're absolutely right. The judges are trying as best they can to be fair and impartial in a very difficult, subjective sport, right? And so getting back to your question, Jeff, what do they always say when you're communicating via email in a very confrontational manner with a coworker? They always say, wait to hit send. Type it up, read it out, check for typos, but don't hit send. Give it a little bit of time, process it a little bit. Send it the next day after you've read it a couple more times. So it's kind of the same thing when it comes to bodybuilding. Whether you won or you placed dead last, give yourself time to process. Probably the longer the better. I mean, I look at that 2011 show now, and I get a lot. I glean a lot more from that. Looking at it now, here it is 13 years later, right?
Yeah.
But just like, the winners of the Super Bowl, are you going to retire next year? I'm going to hold off on commenting on that, because right now I won. I'm the best of the world, and yes, I'm going to be back, but yeah, you need to give time to process all that.
I think even too, like as far as the promoters, as far as their perspective, it's like, I'm sure they're not, like, let's say this show's like we were talking about earlier, it's just not well ran, it's disorganized. I don't think they're purposely saying, hey, let's make this show disorganized. There's a lot that goes into promoting shows, because I've seen the back end of this stuff. And trust me, it's a lot easier to probably prepare for a show as a bodybuilder than it is to actually put a show on.
Yep.
It takes a lot of energy, and you have to group a lot of people together. It takes a lot of finances, just everything that goes into it. So I think as athletes, like I've really come to appreciate that effort from them, whether it's like great show or maybe just an average show. Like, they're really trying to provide a space for us to be able to express what we're working so
and
hard.
Compete,
And
a place to compete.
So I've really tried to make it a point to like show my gratitude towards the promoters that the shows I've done, whether it's like a simple thank you or helping out with something, at a future show or just something small like that. Because they are really trying, and they have our best interests at heart.
Bert, you got anything to add?
No, same thing with the judging. It's like, don't go off the pictures your friends took when you hit your poses. Like, if you want to study the film, make sure it's film, like the whole process.
From a judge's perspective,
there's very few bad calls, and you need to pretend you're the other person, like steelman the argument for them, and just build up a list of why they deserve to place ahead of you, basically. So and the same deal with the promoters. It's like they're doing their best. Like, that's the one reason I've yet to promote a show, is because I know exactly like what goes into that, and I'd rather prep for 2 years straight than promote a show at this point, because it's that difficult. Yeah.
All right, fellas. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
That was a fun
at the end,
conversation.
I guess, you know what? The experience, like your bodybuilding experience, competitive bodybuilding experience, like so much of it is, I guess, in your hands. Like it's what you make of it at the end. And yeah, most people who have a shitty time outside of like the bad coaching, all that stuff, like when it comes to the show experience being a big portion of what made their experience suck, a lot of it has to do with them, not anything else.